What springs to mind when you think of a great World War II tank? Perhaps the mighty Tiger, bristling with armor and firepower, or the T-34, the durable backbone of the Soviet forces. These machines of war, with their legendary status, are often the stars of the show when we reflect on the major battles of the era. But oh so often the reality of these mighty machines does not match their legend. The Tiger, for instance, was plagued by unreliability and came with a staggering price tag. The T-34, on the other hand, suffered from a lack of consistent quality in manufacturing, severely compromising its utility on the battlefield. Undoubtedly, this paints them as highly overrated, and it naturally sparks a couple of questions. What does deserve our praise? What tank thus far has been consistently overlooked as to be the most underrated tank of the war? A highly contentious question, certainly, and doubtless all of you have your own suggestions, but today we're going to be making the case for the tiny little Czech Panzer 38T. Now, this may seem like a bit of an odd proposal at first, as it is hardly a ferocious thing to behold, and yet despite its unassuming appearance, the little 38T is one of the few tanks that was in service for the entire duration of the war and remained viable while doing so. And yet, what do you ever hear about it? Nothing, really. I mean, where are the dramatic, overhyped TV documentaries? Where are the movies in which it plays center stage? Where is the appreciation for this fantastic little tank? It's nowhere. So today we're going to be doing our part to right this wrong by showing you its history, its combat performance, and ultimately making the case for why we believe this is the most underrated tank of the whole war. So let's jump in. The 38T was originally designed and produced for the Czechoslovak military, and it was known as the LTVZ-38, short for Light Tank Model 33. Czechoslovakia, known for its modest but sophisticated interwar armament industry, saw the need for an improved light tank following the lackluster performance of its earlier LTVZ-35, and thus the 38T was conceived with the design being finalized in 1938. German eyes were originally drawn to the 38T when Czechoslovakia, in an effort to maintain peace, agreed to partial annexation in September 1938. This placed some outlying production facilities into German hands, who then began evaluating the 38T for their own use. They liked what they saw, and with the full annexation of Czechoslovakia in March 1939, they also gained full control of its production facilities, the bulk of which were situated just outside of Prague. With the 38T already having been shown to tick all of the German boxes, full production was ordered to continue, with the tanks now destined to serve the Wehrmacht as it swept across Europe in the coming years. Let me quickly interrupt today's video because today I want to talk about something that affects a lot of guys out there, and that's hair loss. Does it now? So, Keeps. What is it? Well, let me break it down for you. Keeps is an online subscription service that helps men keep the hair that they have. And they do it with expert recommended hair loss treatments delivered directly to your door. Look, unfortunately, Keeps came along too late for me. That's why I am bald. About 10 years too late. Here's the deal. Keeps offers clinically proven treatments to combat hair loss. And the best part, they're personalized just for you. Each treatment plan is recommended by a licensed medical provider. They provide unlimited, on-demand access to a dedicated professional for an entire year. That's like having a hair loss expert in your pocket. Most Keeps customers notice results within 6 months of starting treatment, so say goodbye to hair loss and say hello to a confident new you. Keeps has award-winning natural thickening shampoo and conditioner. It's like a spa day for your hair. Hair loss stops with Keeps. Don't miss out on this special offer. Just head over to keeps.com/megaprojects or click the link in the description below. That's keeps.com, keeps.com/megaprojects. Thank you to Keeps for sponsoring the video. And now, back to it. The 38T boasted a robust construction. It was powered by a 6-cylinder petrol engine which provided 125 horsepower and pushed the tank up to a top speed of 42 kph. It had a combat weight of 9.5 tons and a robust suspension system that employed large diameter road wheels, ensuring decent cross-country performance. Armor range from 15mm to 50mm, depending on the specific part of the vehicle and its version. Its primary armament was the Skoda A 737mm gun, a decent enough little gun for its day. This was complemented by two 7.92mm machine guns, one coaxially mounted with the main gun and the other positioned in the hull. Now, these figures are fantastic and all if you're technically minded, but what use are they to us today without something to compare them to? So, in this precious pursuit of context, let's see how the 38T stacked up against the Panzer II, Germany's equivalent light tank. In doing so, we see that the Panzer II was very much lesser than its Czech counterpart. While the Panzer II was similarly nimble with a top speed of 40 kph coming from a 140 horsepower petrol engine, it was much smaller and was widely decried as uncomfortable and unergonomic. Furthermore, the Panzer II was more fragile, with its maximum armor thickness being only 30mm. The Panzer II's main armament was also decidedly weaker, with its main armament being a 20mm autocannon compared to the larger 37mm cannon on the 38T. Now, 37mm wasn't exactly ridiculously big by any stretch, but it at least gave the 38T true anti-armor capabilities that the two sorely lacked. So now we know why, at least on paper, the 38T had the makings of a perfectly decent little tank. So let's move on to look at how this technical performance played out on the real-world battlefield. At the outset of war, on the 1st of September 1939, Germany had a supply of 78 38Ts, enough to fully arm a single regiment. The 67th Panzer Battalion of the newly minted 3rd Light Division received the biggest complement of these 78 tanks and thus serves as an excellent case study for us. The battalion consisted of 4 companies, each containing 1 platoon equipped with Panzer IIs and 2 38Ts. During the invasion of Poland, it was sent into combat at the battles of Bzura River and Kalocin, among others, where it performed very well indeed. Only 6 tanks were completely lost overall, and 2 of those were 38Ts. But it was not all sunshine and rainbows for the 67th 38Ts, as the Polish campaign exposed its chief shortcoming: its thin armor. Thicker than the Panzer IIs it may have been, but thick enough it was not, and it proved extremely vulnerable to 7.9mm WZ-35 anti-tank rifles and 37mm WZ-36 anti-tank cannons, both of which could pretty happily penetrate the 38T's frontal armor at ranges of 100 meters and 300 meters respectively. As for the Polish 75mm field guns, well, they went through that armor like a knife goes through butter. But it should be noted, thin armor was not a problem exclusive to the Czechoslovak design. Rather, it was prevalent among nearly all light tanks of that period. We already know about the thin armor of the Panzer II, but other examples include the French H-35, which maxed out at 40mm, the Polish 7TP that maxed out at 17, the Japanese Type 95 Hargo that maxed out at just 12. So certainly the 38T was lacking, but as far as light tanks went, it really was among the best of the bunch. Following Poland, the 38T's next combat was during the throes of the Battle of France, by which point, with the factories being hard at work, the Germans now had over 200 of them to send into battle, enough to make up 13% of their total tank force. Now, this presents an interesting opportunity for analysis, because with the number of tanks sent to Poland being comparatively modest, perhaps their performance there was just a fluke, and a bigger sample size would reveal some kind of issue that was previously hidden. And to answer this, let's zoom in and focus on the 7th Panzer Division, led by the infamous Erwin Rommel, by far the most renowned of the 2 divisions equipped with 38Ts in France. Doing this certainly looks good for the 38T, as under Rommel's command it served as the linchpin of Germany's sickle cut maneuver through the Ardennes, the one that led to the Allied forces being completely split up, cut off, and, well, decimated. With this maneuver, the 38T was being used in a way that perfectly exploited its strengths and minimized its weaknesses, using the exceptional mobility and speed of the tank to avoid direct clashes with the more numerous French armored forces. However, it's all well and good trying to outmaneuver your opponent, but no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and sometimes you'll have to commit your forces in suboptimal ways. So how did Rommel manage when his 38Ts had to go toe-to-toe with the mighty Char B1 heavy tank, a tank that on paper seemed almost tailor-designed to ruin a 38 crewman's day? The answer to that question comes on the 15th of May 1940, when the 25th Panzer Regiment encountered an entire company of Char B1s outside Flavia, his response to which was to hold the 38Ts back and have his mighty 88mm anti-aircraft guns point their muzzles down from the sky and blow the B1s apart. Now, this may sound like a solid L for the 38Ts, as they found themselves completely outmatched against the B1s and had to rely on other hardware to see the day right. But maybe this interpretation is just a bit too narrow. A tank is a machine after all, and machines are built for specific reasons to fulfill specific niches. No machine, much less a tank, is ever going to be perfect, so perhaps instead our takeaway from this should be that the 38T excelled when deployed correctly, and like all tanks, it would fail catastrophically if it was misused. More evidence for this grounded interpretation of the 38T's capabilities comes from the 19th of May, when Rommel's tanks found themselves on the approach to Arras. Here, the 38Ts clashed with French and British units in what would eventually grow to be the full-blown Battle of Arras, and once again, Rommel ensured victory by capitalizing on the 38T's mobility and not depending upon their firepower and armor to bring victory. So whatever interpretation you ultimately take, what is undisputed is that things only got better for the 38T as the Battle of France continued. Following the collapse of the Northern Front and the evacuation of the British Expeditionary Force via Dunkirk, Rommel's Panzer Division headed south and spearheaded the Fourth Army's breakthrough to the Seine River. In this engagement, the 38Ts had 460 French armor kills claimed and participated in operations that resulted in the capture of over 97,000 Allied prisoners to only 26 38Ts lost. Given the fact that this equates to a kill-to-loss ratio of over 17-1 for the 38T, well, let's just say that's rather good. So, the 38T's performance in France certainly backs our assertion. But this consistently good performance was not to last, as the tank encountered major issues during the invasion of the Soviet Union. Now, this may sound odd, given what we initially claimed about the 38D remaining viable throughout the war, but just bear with me for a second, it's all gonna fit together soon enough, stay tuned. As the invasion of the Soviet Union commenced in June 1941, yet more 38Ts had been churned out of the occupied Czechoslovak factories, and it now equipped 5 out of the 17 German Panzer divisions, accounting for about 14% of the overall German tank strength. Against older, light Soviet tanks such as the T-26 and BT-7, it happily held its own, and it performed as well as it had in France and Poland. But, well, times have changed, and now light tanks such as those no longer made up the bulk of their opponents. Now they were having to face the formidable T-34 and KV-1, the former of which could match the speed of the 38T, but had more armor and had more firepower. The latter of these tanks was somewhat slower, but had significantly more armor and firepower, and there can only be so much you can outmaneuver a superior opponent until your thinner armor and smaller gun become problems that you can't work around. And in the T-34 and the KV-1, the 38T had reached that point. This is exemplified by the 38T's loss rate, which rocketed up compared to earlier campaigns. So bad was the situation, in fact, that by the end of August 1941, 27% of all 38Ts in service had been destroyed beyond repair. Another problem was that the enormous expanses of the Soviet front were pushing the reliability of the 38T to its limits. These conditions, and the desperate need to cover as much of it as possible, resulted in the neglecting of the 38T's maintenance. Time and time again, a German commander said, "It'll be fine, just get another day out of it, or we need to be there ASAP." But it was not, in fact, fine, and the dusty conditions and endless operating time began to take their toll on the little tanker. By September 1941, only 58% of 38Ts were fit for service at any given time. This only got worse as autumn turned into winter, and the 38T had to contend with something much worse than dust, but mud. Mechanical losses soared alarmingly during this period, culminating in over 52 38Ts being abandoned due to mechanical breakdown, just in the case of the 7th Panzer Division alone. The Germans could read the writing on the wall, and at the start of 1942, the 38T began to be withdrawn from frontline service in favor of newer and more capable tanks. But this wasn't the end of the 38T story. The mid-century German regime was nothing if not pragmatic, and they were hardly going to let perfectly good hulls go to waste. It just needed a bit of a rethink to make it viable. Consequently, the 38T remained in frontline service till the end of the war in several different and highly modified forms. So, well, now let's bring this chapter to a close and have a look at them, shall we? The first variant of interest is the Marder III, a tank destroyer created by mating the venerable 38T chassis with a 75mm Pak-40 anti-tank gun, vastly surpassing the original tank's firepower. This was a very big gun for a chassis of that size, and so it had no turret, instead having its gun fixed and only able to fire from a 30-degree arc. It performed admirably on the Eastern Front, punching above its weight and able to take on most tanks of the day at decent ranges. It wasn't perfect, however, and it suffered from a high silhouette and exposed fighting compartment that left its crew vulnerable. 1,736 of them were produced between 1942 and 1944. The next variant of interest is the Panzer 38T, better known as the Hetzer. Debuting in 1944, it offered significant improvements in armor and firepower compared to the original tank, packing a lethal 75mm PaK-39 gun into a compact, low-profile, sloped armored shell. The Hetzer proved itself a potent tank destroyer, with its main drawbacks being limited internal space, a result of incorporating such heavily sloped armor on such a small chassis. It was also the most produced variant of the 38D, with 2,827 of them being produced between 1944 and 1945. Next, there's the Flak Panzer 38T, a 38D chassis adapted for anti-aircraft duties. Fitted with a 2cm Flak 38 gun, this variant excelled in the protection of ground units from low-flying aircraft and infantry. However, only 141 were produced due to a shift in resources that prioritized other combat vehicles. And then there was the SD KFZ 138/1 Grill, a 38T derived self-propelled artillery piece armed with a hefty 15cm SIG-33 infantry gun. 389 were produced in total, and it offered a solid blend of mobility and punch, providing much-needed artillery support in a variety of scenarios. While the earlier version had an open-topped fighting compartment similar to the Marder III, the later model introduced an enclosed superstructure, offering better protection for the crew. These variants, which on the whole were really successful, formed the crux of our argument for the 38T being one of the most underrated tanks of the war. Sure, by 1942, the pure 38T was long obsolete, but because of these variants, it has a successful combat record throughout the entire war. And, well, how many other tanks can really say that? Alright, so, having completed our extensive overview of the 38T, we find ourselves back at the claim that we made at the beginning of the video, that the 38T is the most underrated tank of the war. Look, despite being a pre-war design from a small nation, it played an essential role in Germany's war effort from start to finish. Certainly, it's not the only tank to have completed the feat, as the Panzer IV, following extensive upgrades, also served the German military for the entire duration of the war. But the difference is that while in documentaries, books, and online discussion you'll find no shortage of love for the Panzer IV, and while the 38T is by no means unknown, the appreciation of it is just way less. Furthermore, the case for the 38D as the most underrated tank of World War II requires a deeper consideration of how we define underratedness. Many tend to judge a tank's value solely on its firepower, armor protection, and operational agility, and while these metrics do have their place, there is more to consider for underratedness. The concept of underratedness is multidimensional, involving historical visibility, popular recognition, and professional appreciation. Tanks that typically hog the limelight often have dramatic narratives or iconic appearances associated with them, yet this celebrity status can sometimes inflate their perceived effectiveness or strategic importance and give them popular reputations they really don't deserve. On the other hand, tanks like the 38T, which have received none of this fanfare, have very low hurdles to jump to be able to be considered underrated, and after our investigation today, there can be little doubt that it cleanly clears that hurdle. The 38T, with its modest design of firepower, fails to leave a striking visual imprint upon our collective memory. It neither represented the supposed epitome of German engineering like the Tiger, nor did it embody a nation's industrial might like the American Sherman. Consequently, it fades into the background of the grand narrative of World War II.